Imagine a country where the very rule of law, well, it falters right at its border. And that impacts everything, from national security to your local economy, even the safety of your community. What happens then? Welcome back to the Deep Dive.
Today, we're plunging into one of the most urgent and complex issues facing nations globally, immigration. Specifically, we're really zeroing in on that critical intersection of national security, economic stability, and, well, the fundamental principle of the rule of law. And the numbers, pulled from our diverse sources, they tell a really compelling story that demands our attention.
They really do. As of July 2024, the U.S. has over 7 million individuals on non-detained immigration dockets. Now, just for clarity, non-detained dockets, that simply means these are individuals waiting for an immigration court hearing, but they're not currently held in physical custody. What's truly critical to understand from our research is that a significant portion of this group has concerning criminal histories or pending charges. Right. And these aren't just abstract figures floating around in some database somewhere. We're talking about 425,431 convicted criminals and an additional 222,141 individuals with pending criminal charges, all within that non-detained population. These staggering figures, highlighted by sources like Representative Tony Gonzalez from Texas, they immediately underscore not just the public safety imperative, but also the huge logistical and legal challenges. I mean, managing such a large population and how it directly impacts the very structure, the capacity of our immigration courts.
Precisely. And to put an even finer point on it, our sources reveal that among those convicted, well, we find numbers like 62,231 for assault, 13,099 for homicide, and 15,811 for sexual assault.
Wow.
And in the pending charges category, you've got 1,845 for homicide and 42,915 for assault. These numbers, they're not just statistics, they represent a tangible challenge to public safety and national order.
So our mission today, then, is really to cut through the rhetoric. We've taken a stack of sources, literally everything from everyday Reddit discussions and news reports to academic papers, official data pen, to reveal the multifaceted challenges and, hopefully, potential paths forward in U.S. immigration policy. We want to arm you with the critical facts so you can better understand how a nation balances compassion with its essential duty to protect its citizens and uphold its laws. Okay, let's unpack this.
Let's do it. Let's begin at the most fundamental level. The undeniable imperative of secure borders and the rule of law. A core tenet for any sovereign nation is simply the ability to control who enters and who remains within its territory. Our sources, drawing from diverse ethical and political frameworks, actually including Catholic doctrine, which offers a long-standing view on human dignity and the common good, they affirm that immigration is to be regulated to prevent harm to the common good. Nations don't just have a right, but really an obligation to protect their citizens and their societal order.
That's a critical starting point, isn't it? And what's particularly striking from our sources is that despite all the political divides we see dominating the headlines, there's actually a strong bipartisan consensus on certain aspects. Our research indicates that whether you look at Reddit users from different political leanings or, policy experts, nearly everyone agrees. Violent offending criminals and repeat nonviolent criminals, like those involved in fentanyl smuggling or child exploitation, should absolutely be deported. What did you find most surprising about those areas of agreement?
It's really the universal nature of that agreement. It cuts across so many lines. This consensus on removing dangerous individuals, it points to a shared understanding, I think, that public safety transcends ideological lines. And it's made even more urgent when you consider the scope of the criminal issues we just touched on. Remember, beyond the total of 425,431 convicted criminals on non-detained dockets, there are those 222,141 individuals with pending charges. That includes offenses like 14,301 for burglary and a staggering 56,533 for drug offenses.
These aren't minor offenses at all. In public discussions, they frequently bring up tragic real-world examples that underscore this urgency. Our sources included stories like those of 12-year-old Jocelyn Nunegray, 22-year-old Laken Riley, 37-year-old Rachel Morin, and an unnamed 13-year-old girl allegedly raped by Christian Giovanni Ingalandi. These stories are just incredibly sobering. They underscore a profound human cost. It truly makes you reflect on the immense responsibility involved, doesn't it? Securing a nation's borders while trying to uphold human dignity. And it's crucial to understand that the perception of such threats isn't new. It has deeply historical roots that continue to shape the conversation today.
Absolutely. And what's fascinating here is how these deeply rooted concerns have historically shaped public discourse, and arguably they continue to influence modern perceptions and policy responses. The post-1965 rise in unauthorized migration, for example, fueled what some sources call a Latino threat narrative in American media. Immigration was often framed as a crisis or even an invasion. We see this clearly with the INS commissioner back in 1976 warning of a growing silent invasion, right?
Right.
And then in 1992, California Governor Pete Wilson using footage of migrants dashing through traffic in attack ads, explicitly calling to stop the invasion. This narrative, while definitely controversial, highlights a deeply held concern about uncontrolled entry for many people.
And it's not just about perceived threats to order, is it?
Mm.
Even Ronald Reagan, who was generally a strong supporter of legal immigration, explicitly framed illegal immigration as a national security question. In 1986, he warned that terrorists and subversives are just 2 days driving time from the border crossing at Harlingen, Texas. This connection between border security and terrorism, it really intensified significantly after 9/11. Led to an increase in deportations. But what's critical to note from our sources, though, is that this disproportionately affected Mexican immigrants, even though actual terrorists often entered the U.S. with legal visas.
Yeah, that's a key point.
So this historical context, it really illustrates how national security concerns have continuously informed and reshaped immigration policy, often with unintended consequences.
Precisely. So, okay, we've explored how the rule of law and national security are profoundly impacted by border control and unchecked entry. But this isn't just about security, is it? It spills over directly into our communities and, frankly, our pocketbooks. How do our sources connect this to the economic well-being of a nation's existing citizens and its resources?
Yeah, that's the core issue for many people, right?
Yeah.
And that brings us squarely to the economic realities our sources highlight, showing how immigration challenges can strain public services and even impact labor markets. Our sources indicate that increased unauthorized immigration can severely strain public resources. Absolutely. Communities from Aurora and Denver to Chicago have reportedly seen their law enforcement, education, healthcare systems just overrun. They're straining our resources due to these additional demands. We're talking about tangible burdens on local infrastructure and services meant for existing citizens.
And a key observation from our research is the discussion around labor and wages. It comes up again and again. Critics argue that excessive immigration lowers the cost of labor because some companies actively seek dirt-cheap workers. And this can directly suppress wages, potentially limit job opportunities for native-born citizens. Historically, even labor leaders like Cesar Chavez opposed mass immigration, seeing it as a tool employers could use to keep wages down and prevent unionization.
That's interesting.
Yeah. It raises that critical question of prioritizing our own citizens first and whether our current policies might inadvertently create a kind of race to the bottom for wages.
That's a powerful historical perspective. So, okay, if we acknowledge these significant economic impacts and the strain on resources, what does this all mean for finding practical solutions? A significant and maybe often overlooked point of common ground that emerges from our sources is this call for accountability. Accountability for businesses that knowingly employ unauthorized workers.
Right, the demand side.
Exactly. The argument is pretty simple. If firm, severe, and immediate criminal charges were actually enforced against companies and executives, then the demand for illegal labor would likely significantly decrease, making the problem much smaller.
Yeah, makes sense.
It points to a systemic issue, doesn't it? Where some businesses actually benefit from the broken system. It's about tackling the demand side, not just the supply side, wouldn't you say?
Precisely. It suggests a much more multifaceted approach is needed to truly fix the system. And speaking of a path forward, there is, really widespread agreement across the board that the current immigration system is fundamentally broken.
Everyone seems to agree on that.
Yeah. Many voices from various perspectives are calling for comprehensive reform. This includes not just streamlining legal pathways, maybe by expanding temporary worker programs or creating more efficient visa categories for high-demand sectors, but also accelerating the processing for those seeking to enter legally. That means significant investments in immigration courts, maybe digital application systems, too.
It's clear everyone wants a functional system, something that works, but what about physical barriers, like the idea of a big, beautiful wall, which is often discussed?
Right.
Our sources reveal that while secure borders are broadly supported, a physical wall isn't seen as a cure-all by many. In fact, the majority of individuals who are here without authorization are actually visa overstayers.
That's a huge number.
Yeah, they entered legally and simply never left. So this highlights the need for a A multifaceted approach to security that addresses all entry points and types of unauthorized presence, not just physical crossings. It's more complex than it's often presented.
Indeed. And this raises an important question about how we define and enforce our standards for citizenship.
Yeah.
Who do we welcome as full members of our society? For example, our sources mention that the Trump administration has plans to make the U.S. citizenship test more difficult, potentially even including an essay requirement to assess good moral character.
Right.
This reflects a belief in upholding sort of higher standards for those seeking to become full citizens, suggesting that citizenship is a privilege that should be earned through a rigorous process.
So despite the deep ideological divisions that often seem to dominate the headlines, our sources consistently show that common ground does exist. We've already highlighted the universal agreement on deporting violent criminals. That seems pretty clear. But beyond that, there's also widespread acknowledgement that the current system is ineffective. It desperately needs comprehensive immigration reform. And fundamentally, even amidst really fierce debates, there seems to be a general agreement on treating all individuals with compassion and upholding human dignity, even when there are disagreements about their legal status or their right to remain.
Right. And one intriguing aspect revealed by these sources is how often immigration is used as a political football, as they say,
Yeah, you hear that a lot.
for electoral gain. Our sources suggest that politicians sometimes don't truly believe their own rhetoric, but use it to energize their base. This fear-mongering, as some describe it, ultimately distracts from finding real, pragmatic solutions. It prevents meaningful compromise, trapping us in this cycle of legislative inaction. It's what one source called the fool's gold of politics, a short-term gain that sacrifices long-term progress for the nation.
So, after all that, what does this all mean for you as an engaged citizen?
We've navigated the complex landscape of U.S. immigration, trying to understand the critical role of secure borders, the very real economic impacts on communities and labor, and the urgent need for a functional, lawful system. The stark statistics on criminal activity among non-detained immigrants, they compel a serious response, right? While those calls for employer accountability offer a clear, actionable path, perhaps, to deter illegal labor practices right at its source.
Exactly. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, it leads to a really provocative thought, I think. As Hoover Institution senior fellow David Leal suggests, the real immigration crisis is not that so many people want to move here, but that our policies allow too few workers to migrate legally.
And this leaves us to consider, what if a genuinely conservative approach to immigration isn't just about stricter enforcement, but about creating a legal immigration system that's so efficient and responsive to market needs that it virtually eliminates the incentive for illegal entry? This could, in theory, uphold the rule of law while strengthening our economy and national security, aligning with principles of free markets and limited government.
It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? Is our current system truly aligned with those principles? Free markets, limited government, national interest? Or are we, maybe through unintended consequences, just making it harder than it needs to be? Something powerful to ponder for your next deep dive into the world around you.